So let's start off with the American black bear. Okay. So the black bear track, first of all, has very wide palm pads, and you can see the front foot at the top here, as well as the hind foot below it. In both cases, it has a very wide palm pad, if you can see my cursor here. And we also see on both of them 5 toes, which form basically a little arc around the top. There's some curvature here, okay? And on the hind foot as well, not quite as much on the hind foot, not as much curvature, but there's still some. And they're also, if we drew a line right down the middle of the track and basically bisected it, we would see it's slightly asymmetrical. Okay, the left side doesn't quite line up to the right side. And one of the main reasons for that is because bears have this low toe, okay, on the inside of the track. The other thing is the palm pad, it's curved again on the top, and it's going to be wider on the outside part of the track. It's a little harder to tell in this one, but particularly on the front track. And this is common among many of these species. It basically gets larger on the outside of the track. They also have very large but blunt nails, and we can see one registering right here. They show up in deep substrate. Okay, they don't always register again. And between the toes and the pad, the part that doesn't register, make an impression on the ground, is what we typically refer to as the negative space. Black bears have a lot of fur filled in there. So in certain substrates, you might even be able to see it here. You can actually see little hair marks between them. Okay. Again, I mentioned earlier, they have a low toe. We refer to that as toe one. It's the inside toe. It means it's toward the midline of the animal. So in this case here, these would both be right feet because the low toe is on the inside on the left side. And that's very different from humans. I spoke about earlier how these are, you can look at these, kind of similar if you want to look at this bottom hind track to our feet. But the key difference is that we have a big toe, which is not a low toe. It's either the highest toe or close to the second highest in humans, right? It's very different with bears. And obviously the reason for us is that we walk exclusively on 2 feet. Bears typically are most of the time on 4 feet. And so it also makes it easier. One of the theories is that this low toe, when they're climbing trees, to wrap around a tree trunk or a branch and give them better grip. The hind track is larger than the front track. And one of the main reasons for that also is because the heel pad shows. And you can see it here. This is a really not a perfect track, but you can see this heel pad showing here, and you can see the line of demarcation between the palm pad just above it and the heel pad below it. In the front track, they typically don't have a heel pad that shows. When it does, it's just a round dot. It's actually a little bitty circle, and it's well below the palm pad. Okay, it's not connected. And again, in the hind track, the heel pad is almost always going to show up. And their preferred gait is what's known as an overstep walk, and that's just a fancy way for saying that the hind foot is going to land in front of the front foot where the front foot landed. Typically, there's exceptions to this always, but that's a very it's key to one, understanding behavior, but also trying to differentiate between species. Okay, let's look at a closely related species now. Brown bears are what we refer to in North America as grizzly bears. They also have very wide palm pads, again, 5 toes. One of the differences, though, is that, and it's a little hard to see here, but there's less curvature in their toes across the top. They're more in a line. And you can see this low toe on the inside is not as far down as it is in black bears. So that's one of the ways to distinguish between them. The palm pad is again curved on the top and wider on the outside, just as it is with black bears. Okay. And they also have very large blunt nails. They register in most cases if you have deep substrate, and also they have less fur, so you're not likely to see that in the negative space between the toes and the palm pad. That's not going to show up as much. Again, as I mentioned before, there is a low toe. It's not quite as low, but it's on the inside of the track. Again, very different from humans. And as with black bears, the hind track is larger than the front track. Okay, and again, that's largely due to this heel pad registering. Okay, whereas in the front track, again, it just has that round dot, and a lot of times, most of the time, that doesn't show up. Um, and then again, just as with black bears, their preferred gait is an overstep walk. Okay, so very similar, just a couple of key differences, and really it's with those toes being in a line. So let's compare both of those with polar bear tracks. Okay. Overall, again, they're very similar. They have five toes. They form an arc around the top of the track. Again, this is a front at the top of this picture and a hind below. However, they're very wide tracks. Okay, and one of the reasons they're wide is because again they have so much weight to support, and you can imagine, particularly walking on ice and snow, it can be very thin ice at times. They need to support that weight. And so the larger foot can spread the weight out over a larger surface area. Okay. The palm pad is again curved and wider on the outside, just like the other bear species. And they also have large, blunt nails, but they may not show. Okay. And as you can imagine, they have lots of fur living in very cold climates. So between the negative space, between the toes and the pad, there's a lot of fur, and if you happen to get a really clean register on snow, you might be able to see that. As with the other bear species, again, the low toe, unlike human feet, is going to be on the inside. Okay, and that's going to tell you that again in this case, down here, this is, you can see it clearly. This is a right track. Okay, up here, this is going to be a left front. Okay, and the hind track is actually again, it's going to be larger than the front track, but it's also wider than it is long. And again, that's due to that really long, really big palm pad to support that weight. So the width of it's going to be greater than the length of that track. Okay. The heel pad on the front track, again, is this small dot, and you can actually see a little bit of it right here. It's just this little round, looks almost like a perfect circle. And maybe not in this particular registration, but oftentimes, and it's separated from the palm pad. Whereas in the hind foot, the heel reliably registers and it basically merges with the palm pad. You can see maybe a little line of demarcation here, but it almost looks like one contiguous pad. And again, their preferred gait is an overstep walk where the hind foot would land just in front of the front foot.